Okay, so good evening, everyone, comrades. Welcome to this study hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee. Tonight's political education. It's really important that we're here having these monthly studies the last Wednesday of the month. And yeah, come on in, please share the live stream. Welcome, my name is Hallie Murray. I'm a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and I'm also really honored to be on the National Central Committee of APSC. And it's truly an honor to work under the leadership of the Office of Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela. I'm also excited to report to you. I'm reporting live from our new office space for Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel, working under the leadership of Deputy Chair Ona to promote reparations apparel, promote this message. So salute to the movement. Tonight we are looking at a really important issue of our time. This is the question of colonialism as it affects the lives of African and oppressed people, not only around the world, but inside the US, and also what we white people can do about that. That is the topic of tonight, colonialism and white people's role in overturning it. And the African People's Solidarity Committee is the organization of white people under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. APSC was formed in 1976. It is our mandate to organize other white people to build the movement of reparations and genuine solidarity with the liberation of African people. We salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who developed the political theory of African internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution around the world. We salute Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela, who has put on the ground Chairman Omali Yeshitela's vision of the Black Power Blueprint, and who leads the more than 50 economic institutions of the Uhuru Movement. The African People's Solidarity Committee holds these studies directed to white people monthly at this time, 7 p.m. Eastern, the last Wednesday of the month. Because we see these studies are just a supplement to the incredible political education held by Chairman Omali Yeshitela every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern on his both Facebook page and the YouTube channel for the Burning Spear newspaper. And the studies are called Omali Taught Me. You can search hashtag Omali Taught Me. There's years worth of studies, truly excellent political education on African internationalism. And the African People's Solidarity Committee, Chairwoman Penny Hess, will lead this study, followed by, we'll have a 20-minute discussion for a 20-minute period for questions and answers. And we really welcome your questions. You can submit them in the Q&A feature on Zoom, which is at the bottom of the screen. So just click there to type in your questions anytime throughout the program tonight. And if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can make a comment and we will have someone reading those comments and sending them our way that we can make sure they are addressed in this program. So yeah, Chairwoman Penny is really honored to have been present when the African People's Socialist Party held the founding conference of the Solidarity Committee in the fall of 1976. 1976, that's how long this organization has been around. And Penny Hess has been a cadre member of the African People's Solidarity Committee ever since that day. And in 2001, she published a truly groundbreaking book called Overturning the Culture of Violence, which was written under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and it includes the detailed complicity and participation of white people in the historical assaults and colonial violence against African and oppressed peoples. So I encourage you to get this book. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to my direct leadership, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru, Penny.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Hallie. And I love that space for Uhuru Planet. Very, very exciting. And I want to welcome everybody who is coming on to this program tonight, this political education. I'm Penny Hess, African People's Solidarity Committee. Comrade Hallie is in Boston. I'm in St. Louis, and Comrade Allie, who's going to be on a little bit later, is over in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we're all over, and we want you to think seriously about joining the African People's Solidarity Committee, and we're going to talk more about that. This is an incredible period, an incredible moment in history that we are living in as we've come through. We're actually still in the middle of what the African People's Socialist Party has called the colonial virus, in the way that it has severely affected and targeted the African population, not only here, but other places around the world. And it's also this incredible moment of powerful uprisings led by the African working class in response to the brutal police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And, you know, this period of resistance, which is what makes and creates and deepens this crisis of imperialism that Chairman Omali Yeshitela talks to us about, is something that has broken wide open the question of colonialism. And we must understand it. So, you know, I know that the African People's Socialist Party has taught us that colonialism is the main contradiction. It is the most serious and important question in the world today. It is not a sideline thing. It is not a list of isms. It is the fact that the oppression and colonization of African people is the basis of the foundation of capitalism, parasitic capitalism, and the colonial domination, genocide, oppression, and exploitation of oppressed peoples inside the borders of the United States and around the world is the pedestal upon which we as white people sit. So it's really important that we understand it. And until the question of colonialism, until the system of colonialism and imperialism is wiped off the planet Earth, which it can only happen through the leadership of the organized African working class, there will never be peace, there will never be justice, there will just be a continuation of the violence, war, oppression, rape, and terror that this system, that the US imperialism and parasitic capitalism inflicts onto the oppressed people, the majority of humanity on this planet. And right now, because these questions are out there, so many of us in the white population are looking for answers. There is talk, a lot of talk that I'm reading about and hearing about of white people. Should white people be under the leadership of African people? And if you are thinking about that, as Hallie pointed out, you're in the right place, because the African People's Socialist Party created the African People's Solidarity Committee 44 years ago in 1976. And I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, also the leader of the African Revolution all around the world, and the leader of the African People's Solidarity Committee as well. He is our leader. And when we see so much of what we are experiencing in this particular moment of history, this is because of the work, the leadership, and the political education that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has fought for, has led, and has taught us over the last 50 years. And the African People's Socialist Party was formed in 1972. It has had an uncompromising mission to fight for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people wherever they have been forcibly dispersed around the world under the leadership of the African working class. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has worked to solve the problems, to overturn the obstacles that prevented the victory and liberation of African people in previous periods, and making it possible now for African people to win. And, you know, if you're talking about the question of African leadership, then you're talking about Chairman Omali Yeshitela. If you're talking about reparations, you're talking about Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. The fact that the party first held the first tribunal on reparations to African people in 1982, and made a commitment at that time to make reparations a household word. Indeed it is, indeed it is. And the chairman has solved the problems. He has done what he set out to do, and he has brought the African working class and the world, the colonized of the world, to the brink of a revolutionary period based also on the deepening crisis of imperialism that has been brought about by the resistance of oppressed peoples all around the world. The US can't do with impunity what it has always expected to do. So I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezine Ishitela, under whose leadership we in African People's Solidarity Committee work on a day-to-day basis when we are working for the stand and winning reparations to African people. And we work under her office's leadership, which coordinates the more than 50 economic self-determination institutions of the African People's Socialist Party that is creating a liberated African workers' economy that is negating the imperialist, parasitic, capitalist economy. I also want to salute all of the African women and men of the African People's Socialist Party fighting to make African people free every single day, who inspire me to keep fighting, that the African People's Socialist Party is not just out there at the height of the mass movement. It's out there every single day, no matter what. And for years, sometimes, when the African working class is catching unmitigated hell through this counterinsurgent colonial attack on the African working class, that the party is always there fighting for the liberation of African people, upholding the incredible leadership of the African working class, and fighting to liberate and free Africa and African people, and seize back its stolen resources and the value of its stolen labor. So the Chairman Omali Yeshitela has created a political theory based on science, and it's called African Internationalism. It is something that takes away all of the metaphysics, all of the superstition, all of the idealism that's out there, and puts together the scientific basis for how the world got to be the way it is right now, and what it is that has to be done to overturn the system and unleash the freedom and liberation of African people. And the theory of African internationalism I'm talking about. And you can't debate it. Nobody can win a debate with African internationalism. Nobody can win a debate with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, because this is science. This is recorded history. This is fact, that the chairman has put it together in a way that provides the way forward, not only for the African working class, but for everyone who wants to come along to see a world in which imperialism is wiped off this planet, and African and oppressed peoples become the leaders, become the solvers of the problems left by imperialism, creating a new world in which there is no war, there is no oppressor and the oppressed, and which humanity can flourish. That's the world that I want to live in. And so we can be African internationalists as well. And I ask you tonight to open up your brain, open up your mind, to begin to see the world through the eyes of the African working class. Do not see the world as you want it to be, as we have the ability to falsely create a narrative in which we are in the center of sitting on the pedestal of the oppression of African people and everybody else, but to begin to see the world through the eyes of all of those who are sitting on the hot stove of imperialism and colonial violence. So I want to say that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has given us incredible definitions and clarity. And again, none of these ideas are mine. They all come from the African People's Socialist Party, from African internationalism, what you will find in the books of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, in the Burning Spear newspaper, in whenever of the chairman's political education every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock Eastern, in all of the writings and understandings and videos and events of the African People's Socialist Party in one front or another. So let's talk about what is colonialism. What is colonialism? And we can understand a definition of colonialism is the domination of a whole people or nation by a foreign and alien state power for profit, benefiting the entire colonizer nation. So we're talking about a state power. We're talking about a system backed up by state power, a system of oppression and exploitation that enriches the entire colonizer nation, not just the ruling class, but all of the colonizers. We are the colonizers. We are the colonizer nation. African people, indigenous people, Mexican people, and other oppressed people inside the borders of the United States are colonized, as are indigenous, African, Arab, Asian people all around the world. And the chairman, and in his political understandings, has talked about the state. You might have heard him on Let's Get Free, the Dead Prez album, where he's talking about the state. And as we can look at what the chairman is saying, he's saying that the state is an instrument or institution of violence that upholds and protects the wealth, the interests of the ruling class. And this state in the US is a colonial state. And as the chairman has put it, it is the police department, it is the military, it is the courts, it is the prison. The police are the military inside the borders of the United States. The police are the front lines of the colonial state inside the borders of the United States. The military is the colonial armed representative of colonialism around the world, against colonized peoples around the world. So clearly you will see that there's going to be no reform of the police department in the United States. Maybe there's going to be some kind of seeming defunding, but not really, because police departments have major discretionary funds that they get from all kinds of places, including Bank of America and other kinds of foundations that they have that funnel resources into them that doesn't even come through the city. And police departments are not going to be dismantled, not until the colonial system and the colonial state is overturned by the leadership of the African working class. And that when we see the police murders of African people by the police in this country, they are doing what they're supposed to do. They are doing what they are there for. They are there to be a violent arm of the US government power over the colonized people, to maintain colonialism and to uphold and protect the power, the wealth, and everything else of the white population and the white ruling class. So this, we're going to see this play out, but there is no reform that is going to have any kind of meaning inside the borders of the United States in terms of the police. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has shown us and told us that the state arises in human history when society is divided between the haves and the have-nots, especially when the haves got it at the expense of everybody else. Then they have to create a state, they have to protect what they've stolen, and they have to keep the others oppressed and repressed through means of violence. So we have to understand this, because the oppression of African people is a question of colonialism and colonial oppression. And the African People's Socialist Party does not accept that the problem is racism. They understand that the problem is political, it is military, it is the organization of the state power and oppression against them. So I'm going to read some of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's own words. If you have this incredible book, Vanguard, which is the advanced attachment of the African Revolution and is the political report to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party that was held in October 2018. If you haven't gotten it yet, please order it, but it also may be with your materials for tonight. But I just want to read what the chairman has written about the question of colonialism versus racism. The chairman says, the science of African internationalism enabled our party to avoid the ideological pitfalls that validate the assumption of the superiority of white people. Thus, we have never been diverted from our mission of capturing power and uniting Africa and our nation under the leadership of the African working class. Our party brought science to our defeated African liberation movement at a time when it was generally bogged down in racial and cultural nationalism that indulged in candlelight ceremonies, religious obscurantism, and nostalgia for an often imaginary African past. Through African internationalism, we were able to discover the material basis for the exploitation and oppression of Africans and others in the world. With African internationalism, we can understand the material forces at work in the movement of history. We can clearly see the current shift in the balance of power between the oppressor and the oppressed, between Europe and the rest of us, between the white man and the black man. We determined long ago that characterizing our movement as the struggle against racism was a self-defeating waste of time. The chairman says, what is called racism is simply the ideological foundation of capitalist imperialism. Racism is a concept that denies Africans our national identity and dignity rather than defining the system of their oppression. It relegates African people to the Sisyphean task of winning acceptance from and often becoming one with their oppressors. And I think that is so clear and so powerful, that to fight against racism is to fight against a symptom, to fight against an idea in the heads of white people. And the chairman is saying, that liquidates the national identity of African people as Africans. It makes them some kind of non-American. It puts white people in the center, whereas the struggle against colonialism is about African people taking power over their lives through a struggle for national liberation, just as the Vietnamese carried out, as the Chinese carried out, as the people of Nicaragua carried out, El Salvador, Venezuela, other places, and Cuba. The chairman says, with African internationalism, we have proven that race is simply a colonial invention originating from the enslavement and colonization of Africans and Africa that gave birth to capitalism and simultaneously the European nation. Our struggle has always been for power, not against racism. To the extent that we win power, the racism of others becomes irrelevant. Power is the great equalizer, the fundamental aphrodisiac that is capable of turning a racist of today into a fawning sycophant of tomorrow. The struggle against racism, and I would just say that the incredible uprisings and the exposure of colonialism, even the forcing of the removal of colonial monuments all throughout this country and the world, even that has forced white people to begin to look at African people in a different way and to begin to think about the political and economic questions behind that and what is a principled relationship that we can have to African people. So the chairman says, the struggle against racism is the struggle of the petty bourgeoisie fighting to integrate into the white capitalist world, to board the sinking ship of white power. It is a diversionary struggle reliant on failed philosophical assumptions that must be cast aside as a precondition for moving forward. And by the way, if you're reading with me, I just wanted to say, I'm on page 274, The Theory of African Internationalism from the Vanguard. This is not an innocent issue of semantics. The way this is understood informs our practice. The struggle against racism presupposes one's approach and the struggle against imperialist colonialism another. Africans are not a race, but a nation of people forcibly dispersed across the globe. We have been pushed out of history by our imperialist oppressors, partially through the concept of race. And the chairman is saying, why are Africans a race and others are a nation? That their nation, their nationhood and nationality has been stolen from them as part of their colonization. The chairman continues, our national homeland has been occupied in various ways for millennia. Our people have been captured and shipped around the world as capitalist commodities. Our labor and land have been violently extracted to build the European nation and the international capitalist system. This is what determines our reality and the contours of the struggle in which we have been engaged for more than 500 years. The fight against AFRICOM cannot be characterized as a struggle against racism any more than the liberation of our people from Haiti, from France in 1804, or the necessary unification of Africa to stop the rape of our motherland and the theft of its resources. The material conditions Africans suffer worldwide have their origin in the attack on Africa that led to the capture of our national homeland and our people. Our poverty and susceptibility to ignorance, violence, and material want throughout the world, including in the US, UK, and the rest of Europe, result from the material conditions of existence in Africa since its capture and partition. Are the Iraqis and Afghans fighting against racism? What about all the people of South America and the Caribbean? Certainly the bourgeois ideology of racism serves to unite the vast majority of whites and even some Africans in support of the imperialist agenda. So it's not racism, but racism is a ploy of colonialism that actually supports the imperialist agenda to maintain colonialism against African people. Increasingly, though, this ideology is running up against the material reality of the global power shift, where the oppressed are clearly the locomotive of history. This is what we're seeing happen right now. The chairman wrote this in 2018, but he has many books before this laying out the same reality. The chairman predicted this period that we're facing today and has worked to bring it about day after day. More and more white people are themselves running from their own racial designation. So I'm going to stop there for a minute, and I want to talk about, how this brings us to a second point really the main point of African internationalism, that capitalism is parasitic, that colonialism and imperialism are not later stages of capitalism. And as Chairman Omali tells us, that colonialism and imperialism are actually the catalyst for the birth of capitalism. So let's talk about that, and let's look at that in reality, because in the Middle Ages, Europe was poor, it was oppressed. In 1415, way back in 1415, Prince Henry of Portugal sent imperialist ships and forces into Africa around the year 1415. Europe was poor under feudalism. The majority of white people were feudal serfs tied to the land. And even the nobility was poor. There was something, it's often said that Isabella had to hawk her jewels, Queen Isabella, in order to fund Columbus. And actually, I just looked that up and I found something that said, actually, contrary to popular belief, Queen Isabella of Spain did not pawn her jewels to finance the Columbus voyages to the New World. Her jewels had already been hawked in the whole cost of expelling Africans, which were called Moors, Arabs and Jews from Spain, which was also happening in 1492. So she had already hawked her jewels to do that. And that the Spanish Inquisition, which starting here, was called the Reconquista, where white people of Spain, but actually Spain wasn't even a country until 1492. It was part of Portugal. It was different fiefdoms or whatever. And much of Spain was controlled by Africans in what is called Moorish Spain. And the white people of northern Spain came out in 1492 under Isabella to create this reign of terror that murdered, tortured, killed, and pushed out Africans, Arabs, and Jews that had lived in Spain, in the area that is now called Spain, for 1,000 years. And that had brought universities there, incredible. Spain, that area was the most advanced region of Europe during the Middle Ages. So, this whole question of whiteness and the emergence of whiteness, and Spain played a major role in that. And Queen Isabella herself played a major role in that. So in 1415, this Portuguese prince, Henry the Navigator, he's called, became, quote, fascinated by what was going on in Africa, quote unquote. This is how the white people tell it. I'm quoting something that, a list of colonial dates that I got from the internet. And it's saying by 1420, 5 years later, after he sent the first ships out, the Portuguese were already sending colonizers, settler colonialists, to the island of Madeira, which actually is an African set of islands off the northern coast of Africa. 5 years later, 1427, just 22 years later, after Prince Henry the Navigator started sending out these people to assault Africa, a Portuguese captain sailing for Henry the Navigator discovered, quote unquote, the Azores, another set of islands that belonged to Africa. And Portuguese settlers were sent to the islands of the Azores by 1439. By 1446, Portugal claimed ownership of the region of what is now called Guinea, subsequently became the center of the Portuguese trade in African people on the West African coast by 1446. So 30 years later, by 1450, a sailing ship developed in the Mediterranean, quote unquote, was sent down the west coast of Africa as the Portuguese, as the white people were beginning to colonize the whole coast, the whole west coast. By 1456, they went around, or they discovered the Cape Verde Islands, which are large area of islands off the west coast of Africa. By 1462, Portuguese settlers arrive in Cape Verde, and that 1466, the Portuguese settlers on Cape Verde Islands are granted a monopoly on the trade in African people. 1466. 1483, the Portuguese established a further presence on the west coast of Africa at the mouth of the Congo River. And it goes on and on. I'll just stop there, but Africa was colonized immediately. And the chairman often quotes this writer, this historian, who died a few years ago. His name is Hosea Jaffe. The chairman quotes him extensively in many areas, but he's saying that by about the year 1500, Portugal alone had taken some 700 tons of gold out of Africa. And that 700 tons of gold was, as he called it, the first installment of about 13,500 tons of gold out of Africa. So that's what brought wealth. And so I looked up, well, what would be 7 tons of gold be worth in US dollars? Because this book was written in, I think, in the 80s or 70s. And it said that 7 tons of gold, 700 tons of gold would be equal to $294 billion. And if you own that gold, then you would be in the top 20 economies in the world. So you're talking about the wealth that was taken into Europe from that alone. But then the ultimate question of the primitive accumulation of capital that the chairman has analyzed and understood, but what Karl Marx called the primitive accumulation of capital is, let me just read it, what the chairman always quotes on page 296 in the book Vanguard. The chairman quotes Karl Marx from the book Capital, where he says the discovery of gold and silver in America, the extirpation, enslavement, and entombment in mines of the Aboriginal population, meaning indigenous people, the beginning of the conquest and looting of the East Indies, which is India, the turning of Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins, signalize the rosy dawn of the era of capitalist production. These idyllic proceedings are the chief momenta of primitive accumulation. And what he means by primitive accumulation is the startup money. Because, you know, capitalism, or wealth, is not built in capitalism through incremental savings. It is through massive infusions of capital. That is how people get rich. And that's also how capitalism began. That's how Europe got to be the most wealthy nation, as a white nation, that has ever existed on the planet Earth, except for now the United States. This is where this wealth came from. It came from the enslavement of African people, the theft of the gold of Africans, and in the United States, what is now the United States, the genocide against the indigenous people, the theft of their land. I have read that the land base of the United States is worth at least $24 trillion. And that belongs to the indigenous people. That is still theirs. So that is what Karl Marx is talking about with the primitive accumulation of capital. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the one that took that from, that was really basically nothing more than a footnote, because if you look in the book Capital, you have to go to like page 800 to find this thing where he's otherwise talking about the European worker as being the central key force to revolution against capitalism. But then he just mentions this, but he never can draw a conclusion from that. That took Chairman Omali Shatella to do that. And, you know, when you talk about the assault, the kidnapping, the trafficking of African people who are human beings turned into commodities for sale, the most valuable commodities, more than gold, more than silver. And with that, the crops associated from their stolen labor, the value of that in the period of the enslavement of African people, the value of cotton, sugar, tobacco, coffee, tea, you name it, more and more products and natural resources stolen from African people and from the peoples on the planet Earth on the stolen land of the indigenous people. You're talking about what has happened. You're talking about the colonial domination of African people. How can you talk about turning African human beings into commodities? How can you talk about the fact that literally something like 15 to 20,000 African bodies lay under the buildings of Wall Street right now? That African labor created the wealth in every possible way that all white people experience, and that Africans were kidnapped, they were pulled away, they were dominated, they were seized even from their language. They couldn't speak to each other. They were stripped from their family, their culture, their understanding of the planet, and their own science, and just, you know, turned into things, brought to, forcibly dispersed, not only to the United States, but throughout the Caribbean and South America, and as work machines. And then how can you say that the US has made trillions of dollars from the stolen labor of African people and that this is racism? How could you say that? This is colonialism. This is colonialism. And, you know, there's somebody who wrote an article that was in the New York Times a few years ago, and it was called King Cotton's Long Shadow. And he said, it is not simply that the labor of enslaved people underwrote 19th century capitalism. Enslaved people were the capital. 4 million people worth at least $3 billion in 1860, which was more than all the capital invested in railroads and factories in the United States combined. Seen in this light, the conventional distinction between slavery and capitalism fades into meaningless. And it's nice that, you know, a professor from Harvard would write that, but this is what the Chairman Omali Shatella, and other Africans have been writing and documenting for a very long time. But the fact is that just inside the United States alone, the wealth created by African people it can't even be calculated. And I want to go back to what the chairman quotes often from Hosea Jaffe in this book called The History of Africa, A History of Africa. He says, colonialism as the genesis of Europe. And he says the 15th century then saw the multiplication of the primary or primitive accumulation of European capitalism. And Africa played the most important part in the process as the principal arena of European colonialism, the very genesis and foundation of the capitalist system. From the turn of the 16th century, the Americas and Asia were added to this foundation, and out of this totality arose capitalism and modern Europe itself. Before capitalist colonialism, as the chairman has quoted many times, there was no Europe, only a collection of feudal, mercantile, and tribal towns, farms, villages, discrete states and kingdoms, vying and warring with each other, just as in Africa, but on a different property basis, that of private property in the land. Europe then was neither a concept nor a reality, at most a vague idea that Arabs, but not Europeans, had long ago of some place northwest of Greece. As long as Europe remained isolated from the world, there was no Europe. When it became connected with and dependent on First Africa, then the Americas, and finally Asia. It began to become a reality and an idea. Only when Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, Dutch, English, German, Danish, and Swedish confronted and clashed with Africa, America, and Asia did the need arise for them to consider themselves as a set, a whole, different from, hostile to, and eventually, quote, superior to Africans, Indigenous, and Asians. Colonialism gave them a common interest. This common interest, slaving, plantations, the world market, looting precious metals, spices, and territory, markets and sources of wealth, was also the source of their conflicts among them. From 1500 on, they had already started to quarrel and fight over the colonial booty. In these intra-European conflicts, Portugal and Spain had in time to give way to Holland and France, and these in the 18th century to Britain, while German hidden colonialists, Calvinists, Catholics, and Jews alike steadily garnered what they could of the booty without shedding their blood or losing their own property in the process. The scramble for Africa that led to the 1884-85 Berlin Conference had its roots in 4 centuries of struggles between the European powers for the division of Africa. Colonialism, the basis of European unity, was also the basis of its disunity. So Chairman also sums up that capitalism was born in disrepute of the rapes, massacres, occupations, genocides, colonialism, and every despicable act humans are capable of inflicting. Capitalism was not responsible for some great, otherwise unimaginable leap in production, which despite its contradictions, which isn't that's how we learn about it, resulted in human progress and enlightenment. That's how we hear about it from the left, from the white left. What capitalism did was to rip the vast majority of humanity out of the productive process in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Australia, and what has become known as the Americas. The hundreds of millions of dead due to the slave trade and slavery itself, the millions exterminated everywhere Europeans ventured. These are the people whose hands were forever removed from a relationship with nature that would result in production. Europeans achieved their national identity by way of this bloody process. This is not something that only happened a long time ago. The world's peoples are suffering the consequences of capitalism's emergence right now. So that is very powerful, very moving, and very true. So if African people are under colonialism inside this country, also in Europe, and of course throughout Africa, and wherever Africans have been forcibly dispersed around the world, then we as white people are the colonizer nation. We are the stormtroopers. We are the police before there were police. We have had the power of life and death over African people, and we still do. We still do. Have you ever heard of a white person going to prison or the death penalty for killing an African? I don't think so. Very rarely. And only because the period may force that. We were the volunteer cavalry. We were the slave catchers, the overseers, the lynchers, the murderers, the rapists, the exploiters. We're the mutilators, the liars, the thieves. Read about Denver, Colorado, for example, in 1864 after the Sand Creek Massacre. Read about the Sand Creek Massacre. What we did, that was volunteer white people that ripped out babies from the wombs of indigenous women, that cut out their vaginas and used them as saddle horns. And that when white people came together in the Denver Opera House in 1864 and yelled out to the top of their lungs, it almost took the roof off, exterminate them. We were the scalpers. Read the book, 100 Years of Lynchings. Read the book about they were her property, the white women who achieved white women's liberation through owning African human beings. And that, because the chairman says that the victor creates the narrative, that we have created it, and the society has created that the colonizers are the subjects of history. We are the reasonable ones. We are the brilliant ones. We are the, we don't get upset. We don't, we solve every problem. We bring civilization to the people on the planet Earth. This is all inherent into our self-narrative. And that what is happening is that the fact that this is the colonial narrative is being exposed by the resistance of African people. And it also has to be very clear that for us to live on tree-lined streets, to have a 401k, to have a future, to have social wealth, to have college education, to have a house, that it requires the blood, the suffering, the violence against African people and oppressed people on the planet Earth. They go together. So sending a few dollars here and there to some kind of charity project that's doing something somewhere in Africa is absolutely fraudulent. It's absolutely, objectionable. That we owe reparations, and that if we want to turn loose our whiteness and turn loose our colonizer relationship as the subjects of our own history, and turn that loose and overturn it and get rid of it. It's not by sitting around unlearning racism. It's about taking responsibility to learn what is colonialism and what the struggle of African people and African workers is about as a struggle for political power over their lives, return of their stolen resources, their land. They must control it. How incredible is it that we look at Africa, African people live, African workers, in incredible poverty. When you talk about people making $2.50 a day in some parts of Africa, you're talking about the people who went to college, the school teachers. You're talking about sometimes engineers. This is what the educated people make, quote unquote. The African workers make almost nothing, have to figure out every single day how they live. And yet the greatest diamonds, the cobalt, the coltan, the tin, the gold, all of the minerals on this planet that are needed for the functioning of imperialism exist inside of Africa and are taken out of it every single day for the benefit of Europe. African workers never even see it. They've never even seen a polished diamond. They don't know what it looks like. This is what we're talking about, that situation, the conditions, the colonial conditions of African people inside this country and around the world are required for our lifestyle. And this is what we have to look at. So we are not unlearning racism. We are taking up a responsibility to be part of the strategy created by the African People's Socialist Party that is very, very serious about winning power, about liberating Africans, that has organization on the ground throughout the United States, in the Caribbean, in Europe, and on the continent of Africa. It is bringing the question of revolution and a vanguard party back to the world agenda. It is creating that. It is creating and carrying out everything that is needed to win the liberation. It's very serious about doing that. And they created the African People's Solidarity Committee as a strategy to place African internationalists in white face behind enemy lines, inside the colonizer nation, inside the belly of the beast. We raise the question of African liberation. and parasitic capitalism and our relationship to it and how we take it on is so brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It is not the responsibility of Africans to go there. It is our responsibility to go there and to take up the question of reparations as a revolutionary demand. What is not owed to Africans? Everything is owed. All the wealth that has been created on this planet, and that we're returning the stolen wealth to the organized African nation and the African working class organized for power, not an individual, not as a favor, but this is what's owed. It must go back to African people if they're gonna win. This is part of the strategy, and they're gonna win. So we want you to understand this question of colonialism, and we can talk about it a lot more. And we're going to continue to talk about it because, again, it's the central question. It is the reality that makes this two Americas. It's why we have resources, but African workers don't. But it's why we have resources and we can pretend that we never see them. We never see Africans. We can pass African people every single day and the lives they lead and see something of it, or we can hide from it, but we're still on stolen land of the indigenous people, and we have social wealth based on hundreds of years of the forced stolen labor of African people and the theft of their genius, the theft of their talent, the theft of their inventions, everything, their intellectual property that has been stolen from them, everything has been stolen from them. And we owe reparations. It is the redistribution of the wealth of the world. It is the African working class demanding the redistribution of the wealth of the world. It is the understanding that white workers sitting on the pedestal of the oppression of oppressed and colonized peoples will never lead a struggle against capitalism. I mean, the Capitalist Manifesto was written in 1848, like 180 years ago. We've not done it yet. We haven't led this struggle against capitalism in every way. We have fed our stomachs and pocketbooks to get our rights, whether it's as women, whether it's as LGBTQ, whether it's as workers, to get more, to demand a greater share of the stolen loot that the Wall Street and the ruling class and 1% has in their hands and their bank accounts. Give it out, give it to us. That's what we fought for. We fought for our own interests. We have never stood in solidarity with the organized party of the African working class until now. And this is powerful because we can be one to this. We hate capitalism. If you're here, you hate the system. You don't want to see the police gunning down African people in our name. You don't want to see the conditions that African workers are experiencing and have experienced every day of their life. And as the chairman says, every minute, every day, every hour of colonialism is violence and terror. And it can only continue to exist because of the complicity of white people. And I'm not just talking about Trump supporters. I'm talking about liberals. I'm talking about white leftists. I'm saying this is something else. This is the true revolutionary struggle. I want to be on the side of the African working class. That is what is going to even save this planet and solve the problems that imperialism has left us with, that has left the people on the planet Earth with. It wiped out hundreds of millions of indigenous and African people in the process of building parasitic capitalism and the process of maintaining it. Why wouldn't it wipe out the earth? And how could you think that you can wipe out human beings and the earth itself would not be affected by it because human beings are part of the entire ecosystem. This is the world that we live in, where everything is a commodity, everything is for sale, based on the fact that African human beings were commodities. We hate this. We don't want to live this way. If you get sick during the colonial virus, during COVID-19, if you get this, how many millions of dollars are you going to have to pay to go to the hospital? You know, and African workers can't even afford to go. And if they do, they're killed in the hospitals. And this has been shown. You know, this is a system that has no redeeming value. There is a possibility of another leadership, of another kind of system, socialism, but socialism can't come about through white people. That would be socialism built on colonialism. That would be national socialism. That this is socialism that is genuine socialism because it is socialism led by the African working class in power, seizing the means of production. So we have a responsibility to fight this war of ideas, to win reparations, to win other white people to see the world as it really is. And it's very incredibly liberating. To pay reparations is not a punitive stand. It is incredibly exhilarating to be part of the energy of the African Revolution, which embraces all oppressed and colonized people. It's not doing something for itself. Africans are bringing indigenous and oppressed and colonized people everywhere into their embrace as they take on imperialism and bring it down. They are for every struggle. They are for the Palestinian people. They are for the Venezuelan, the people of Venezuela, the people of Cuba. They are part of that. They are one with that. They are completely united with the indigenous and Mexican population, an Unión de Barrio organization inside the borders of the United States. We can't be part of that in any other way outside of this process except by appropriating their culture or trying to look like them or some other ridiculous thing that we're always trying to do. But what we can do is take a principled stand. And we want to call on you to join the African People's Solidarity Committee, to be cadre, to take responsibility, to begin to solve the problems, to understand that if we embrace African internationalism, it requires that we not just sit around and talk about it and analyze it and have talk fests, but we have to be part of changing the world. We have to emulate the members of the African People's Socialist Party that give themselves to the African Revolution through membership in the African People's Socialist Party every day of their lives, because they must win and they will win and they are winning. But the leadership of the party over African People's Solidarity Committee requires that we're not passive. We have to take responsibility. We have to become African internationalists, and then we come to the same conclusions that African people in the party, that the party itself comes to. We unite with it. This is what we have to do. Of course, we have to go into the white population. We have to organize white people, even though maybe we didn't want to when we first joined this. But we come to understand that this is, okay, this is our job. This is our job right here. And we must do that not just when there's a huge mass movement going on, but every day, every day, every day when the media is gone and the television cameras are gone and everything's settled down in Portland and wherever else, we still have a responsibility because colonialism goes on and deepens every day. It doesn't stop. Imperialism is working all the time to keep itself afloat, to survive this period. It's still doing everything it can do to stay on top of the resistance of oppressed people. We have a responsibility to go into the heart of that white society and bust it wide open and bring the voice of African internationalism, of Black power into the white society. That's our job. We have to win other white people, and we have to do it in an organized political way as cadre. We will solve problems. We will take this on. We will be there when the African Revolution, and this is the phase that it's in right now, we will be there, organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. That's what it means to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. It is the leadership of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which of course is under the party, but APSC coordinates it. And Uhuru Solidarity Movement is a mass organization. So if you don't want to do something, you don't have to. If you don't want to, be active, you don't have to. We welcome you. We want you to be active. We want you to get out there and be fighting for reparations to African people, but you don't have to. But when you take a stand as cadre in the African People's Solidarity Committee, you are making a commitment to take this on, whatever it takes, I will do it. And that we are an organization, we have democratic centralism, we have criticism, self-criticism. And this is how we learn to get rid of our baggage and the thoughts in our heads, because we do the work. We do the work, and of course we are criticized, and we have to take that on and sum it up and unite with it and move forward. And it's a beautiful, incredible process. So this is our relationship. This is our responsibility. We must become African internationalism. African internationalists, and we must come to the same conclusions as the African Revolution. Of course, we owe reparations. We must win other white people. This is our liberation, absolutely. This is our ability to join African people and the people on the planet Earth in a principled way. This is our self-criticism to African people. This is the rectification of our relationship that lets us be part of humanity for the first time and not a colonizer, not holding that gun, either visibly or covertly, against African people and oppressed people on this planet. It lets us be part of the future that is going to be the just explosion of human genius that is going to solve every problem, take science out of the hands of capitalism and put it into the hands and needs of the people under the leadership of the African working class. So just want to end by saying, join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Think about this very seriously. And I want to thank you. And again, salute Chairman Omali Shatella, Deputy Chair Onizine Shatella, and the entire African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru. And thank you for participating.
Wow, Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny, that was really profound. I mean, if I could join APSC again right now, I would be the first to do it. Wow. I took a lot of notes on that. I'm sure all of us were deeply moved by this extremely sobering reality that we are in, that it's truly colonialism. And it's just the way you painted out the whole history, just date by date, fact, this is the science of African internationalism. And I just really salute you, Penny, for this powerful overview. And of course, Chairman Omali Shatella, who we work under his leadership to have this understanding, everything that you've been talking about. And so, but I'm going to bring up our comrade Ali Ayello to talk about how and why you should join. But before that, I just want to do a reminder that we encourage your questions and comments. You can use the Q&A feature of the Zoom. So please send us your questions. We will have a 20-minute section at the end. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave a comment and we will have someone send those to us that we can make sure they're read live and have your questions answered. So without further ado, I'm really excited to bring up Comrade Ali Ayello. She's a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, as well as membership chair of USM. And she's going to talk to you about why you should consider joining APSC. So, Uhuru Ali.
Uhuru, I just want to give a huge salute to Chairwoman Penny Hess for that amazing presentation and overview and study. That was extremely profound, and I just really want to salute Chairwoman Penny for that study and all of the leadership that you provide in APSC since its founding in 1976. And even that call to join, that laid it out right there. So I just really want to salute that. I thought that was a profound study laying out our role, as the colonizer, but also providing solutions of what we can do to overturn that, what we can be a part of. And I want to talk to you more about that today. And before I move on, I of course just want to salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela for creating this space for us as white people to be able to be a part of the African Revolution, to be able to be a part of this movement, and to be able to rectify our stand, as the colonizer nation, to be part of overturning this system. And, even just creating the theory of African internationalism that allows us as white people to see the world through the eyes of the African working class, not, as Chairman Penny said, not how we want to see it, but the world how it really is. So I really, want to give a deep, profound appreciation and salute to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, as well as to Deputy Chair Ona Zene Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, who's the architect of the Black Power Blueprint and the leader of the independent anti-colonial African economy that's being built as we speak. And Deputy Chair is a dynamic leader that many of us, work under as the reparations movement, work under her leadership, and really just want to give a profound salute to Deputy Chair Ona Zene Yeshitela, as well as the entire National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party and all of its members. And I want to talk to you all about joining the African People's Solidarity Committee, the cadre organization of white people that works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, the vanguard party. And as Chairwoman Penny said, this isn't, the time to be passive, to let that go, but to take action and to do something. And, we can do that in APSC. And as has been said, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the party formed APSC in 1976 based on the science of African internationalism that we just heard, on the understanding developed by the chairman that all white people live on the pedestal of the oppression of African and colonized people that built this parasitic capitalist system. And, this study laid this out so brilliantly. And the party created and formed APSC as the cadre organization to open up a new front of the African Revolution in the colonizer nation, to go into the white community and be Black power and white face, to have a strategic role to raise reparations and to lead other white people, to win other white people, obviously under the leadership of the party, to pay reparations and to stand in solidarity, in true material solidarity with the African Revolution. And this was an incredibly brilliant and bold strategy. And as the chairman has said so many times, that that all of our dreams and all of our aspirations that we have as white people require drone strikes in Pakistan and the colonial terror that African people face on a daily basis. And becoming a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee is our way as white people to say no more genocide in my name. I don't want my dreams and aspirations to come at the expense of African and colonized people. And not just to say that, not just to do it, but to go all the way in bringing down this violent colonial system. The African People's Solidarity Committee is a way for us as white people to become full-time revolutionary cadres, and for us to take responsibility to lead the colonizer white population under the leadership of the vanguard party, the African People's Socialist Party. Because, we know this what's happening right now, these courageous and righteous uprisings by the African working class, this is not some trend for us as white people, to hop on, but this is something for us to really join in solidarity with. And the party has always been there fighting, and we can be a part of this long trajectory to actually, win the total liberation for Africa and African people by raising, going into the white community and raising reparations and being that base. And APSC is a dynamic organization of cadre that work as solidarity forces in Uhuru Foods and Pies, in Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles, in the Black Power Blueprint, in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and so much more. So many incredible roles that our forces take on. And APSC, really means being a member, being a cadre really means we're taking responsibility for doing the work, doing more than just protesting, but taking responsibility for raising reparations and to win other white people to do this as well. And, this is a new era. This is, we see it happening around the world. This is a new era, and the crisis of imperialism is deepening. White power is a sinking ship. We see it. It's sinking, is going down. And this isn't the time to have one foot in and one foot out. This is the time to go all the way to deepen the crisis of imperialism and merge our interests with the African working class and colonized people worldwide. And this is the time to become a full-time revolutionary and to do the work to end this violent colonial system that we just talked about. So I really want to call on you to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Join. And if you unite with this study, this is the organization for you. This is the place for you. If you want to see an end to this, then this is the place for you. And so the way that you can join APSC is by going to our website, apscuhuru.org. So apscuhuru.org and go to the Get Involved tab and fill out the form. It's super simple, and we will be in touch with you within 24 hours to get you started, being as a member of APSC in our, new membership process. So go ahead, go to our website and become a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Thank you, Ali, for that really mobilizing call to join. I unite. Every white person should, apply to join. And so, yeah, thank you again, Ali, for that. And now we have let's see, everyone is frozen. I don't know if I'm still visible. I'm going to keep going, though, so someone can tell me if I froze or not.
You're not frozen, Hallie.
Okay, all right, it was your screen then. Okay, so we have some Q&A, and again, please send your comments. If you're on Zoom, you can drop them in the Q&A section. You can also put them in the comments of the Facebook or YouTube live stream. So our first question is from Sandy Forrest. Wasn't the Sand Creek Massacre in the same locality where the Columbine school shooting happened? What goes around comes around.
Uhuru, well, I don't know if it's exactly in the same place. Maybe it was, but in any case, the violence that is expressed by white people is simply white people doing what we've always done. And that's how colonialism was established, and the colonizer nation was established by white people committing violence against African indigenous people and stealing this land and attacking and burning down African towns that were building wealth or attempting to create their own independent economy, et cetera. I mean, that's what, it's just a continuation of the violence that this system and this country, the so-called colonial country, is built on. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Penny. So our second question is from Leah Fifield. Are there other Indigenous-led organizations in addition to Unión del Barrio that have an organizational relationship with the African People's Socialist Party?
Well, there have been at different times. I really can't answer that, but I know that the relationship with Unión del Barrio is one that has been very, over 30 years, and is a very profound relationship. And absolutely that the African People's Socialist Party has unconditional solidarity with the right of Indigenous people to their land, that this land belongs to the Indigenous people. And that the African People's Socialist Party sees the struggle of African people as also being part of the struggle of the Americas, and sees the relationship with Indigenous people as a very deep within the DNA of African and oppressed people. So it's very profound, and the international solidarity of the African People's Socialist Party is profound. It's beautiful. It's it's just uncompromising and very, very inspiring.
Uhuru. Our next question is from Mads Ambrose. They say, Uhuru, Penny, thank you for this study. When speaking to other white people about colonialism, some point to patriarchy as something that existed before Europe colonized Africa, and often bring up the Mongols as an example. Some white feminists claim that fighting colonialism will not end so-called patriarchy because of this. Can you speak more about fighting colonialism versus fighting patriarchy?
Well, I know that the largest military on the planet Earth is not by patriarchy. What is patriarchy? Does it have state power? How do you fight patriarchy? What is it? And it's something that white women think about. I know that. I've heard white women raise it. I don't hear African women and African working class women raising patriarchy. What is it? We don't know. Where is it? Where is it located? How do you fight it? I do know that white women have struggled for their rights at the expense of African people over and over and over again. And right now I am reading this book, and I really would like to have a study about it, and maybe we can, called They Were Her Property, about white women who were slave owners and slave mistresses. And, it talks about how white women were trained to be that from 3 years old, 2 years old, that the colonized little children are very clear that they are the colonizer from very early on, including women, and that this has been about, just the power of life and death that white women had, as well as white men, over African people. So I don't know, what is this patriarchy? Patriarchy is the white narrative. It is white nationalist. It is something that wants to maintain the power of white women on the pedestal of the oppression of African people. It wants to continue to be the slave master, the slave mistress, the white woman with colonialism intact and the relationship with African people intact. That the struggle that determines the future of this planet is the struggle against colonialism, the struggle to defeat capitalism. And so, yeah, maybe after the African Revolution is won and imperialism is destroyed, then yeah, any white women are still around fighting for the interest of colonialism are going to be seen as the enemy they will be the representatives of white power. And, you know, it's just so clear that the white women's movement has been and is something to maintain colonial domination over African people, to win white women's rights, to be equal colonizers, equal slave masters, equal lynchers, everything else, equal colonizers of the entire world, equal police, colonial police, equal generals in the US military. That's what is being talked about, and not, you know, it's talking about white women's rights at the expense of African people. African women are not talking about patriarchy. So the question is a struggle against colonialism. And to me, you know, it's just that the question of patriarchy is a white nationalist idea in the heads of white women to maintain power over African people.
Thank you, Penny, for that response. Our next question is from Jeanette Cruz. If there was one book you would recommend for someone thinking about joining the party, what would it be?
Well, I would say that it would definitely be Vanguard. The book Vanguard is the chairman's most recent book. And it also contains within it, though, previous chapters of An Uneasy Equilibrium, which are really, you know, the essential understandings of African internationalism. So those chapters from his previous book are included in here because they, you know, they just set the standard, they set the bar for how we can understand African internationalism. And the other chapter that's included is called The Question of the Nation, and what it means for the African nation, which is another study that we can take on and do, you know, in this series. But it, you know, it has the deepening crisis of imperialism. This just lays everything out, and why the party is the vanguard. There's also the quotations of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, which is a good brief summation. You know, clips of statements and political education that the chairman has, you know, that was compiled from the chairman's works over, you know, many years. So that also is really, really important. I would also say reading The Burning Spear every month and listening to the chairman's political education, hashtag Omali Taught Me, every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern.
All right, a couple more questions. This is from an anonymous ask, and they said, the questions that I get asked that I'm not sure how to answer is, so I'm on board, I'll join, but how do I start to disengage with capitalism? Do you still shop from Amazon, and are there marketplaces or resources online that are still commerce-based but African-supported merchants? So in summary, they want actionable suggestions on how to change their daily voting in terms of where they spend their money so that they're not part of the system.
Well, I mean, there's so many things. If you know, want to put your money into the African liberated economy that is negating the, you know, the parasitic capitalist economy and is the economy of the African working class, you can go, for example, to blackpowerblueprint.org and donate. And we would ask everybody, you know, if you do support and unite with what you heard tonight, please go there and put in your resources to that. And you can read, Anonymous, you can read on that website and see incredible pictures of all of the work and the projects that are going on in North St. Louis on the ground now, from the development of the Uhuru House, the transformation under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela and the African community there, from a condemned building to a beautiful state-of-the-art community center, to a beautiful garden across the street where that red, black, and green flag is flying, and the stage has been built, and many other projects that are being worked on there. So that is one thing that you can do. But this is not about, and there's, you know, a million different ways that you can contribute reparations to the work of the African People's Socialist Party. But disengaging with capitalism is not a personal thing in that way, because we're on indigenous stolen land. We still have social wealth. We enjoy democracy because we are, because we're the colonizers, because the courts are made for us. We don't get sent to prison on 3 strikes, you're out, and for the rest of our life or something, that happened. So it's not about a lifestyle in that way. You can still be, if you're a school teacher or a doctor or a worker of some sort, you still can live your life and do that. But you organize there among the white people that are in your life every day, that you organize and bring them into this stand under the leadership of the African Revolution and see our future in that. So it really isn't about disengaging with capitalism. We have to engage with capitalism. That's what our responsibility is. In fact, we're taking on a campaign in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement called Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. So that's engaging with capitalism. We have to take it on. We have to go up into it. We have to, be there where it is and force this question and be the voice of the African working class, and the organized African revolution has to be coming out of our mouths, winning white people to the stand. So it's a really different way of seeing this. We have to do what we do, but as revolutionaries under the leadership of the party. But definitely there is a whole system of liberated African workers' commerce that has been built by the African People's Socialist Party, from the Black Power Blueprint also to the Buy Black Power products. There's Decolonize of ANWO, there's Uzi of International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. There's so many fronts. There's the Uhuru Foods and Pies, based in Oakland and St. Petersburg. There's the Uhuru Furniture Stores in Oakland, California and Philadelphia. There's many, many places that you can spend your money. You don't have to go to Amazon or anything like that. But what we have to do is go into the belly of the beast and organize. So thank you for that question. It's a very good question.
Uhuru. So our next question is from Alex Dom. They say, Uhuru, thank you so much for helping me to understand colonialism versus racism. I am a new member of USM and I have so much to learn. My first question is, what are the names of the books that Penny referred to during the study? Would the most recent book written by Chairman Amalia Shatella be the proper book to start reading? Thank you.
Yes, that would be a good book. Uhuru, Alex. Yeah, I met you last week down here at our demonstration, or a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, when you came to St. Louis for the demonstration to make Bank of America pay reparations. And it was great meeting with you. This is a great book to start with because, like I said, it also has some elements and components of a previous book, and it really has everything you need to know about African internationalism in the most up-to-date format. But there are other books as well. There's Amalia Shatella Speaks, there's One Africa, One Nation, there's Uneasy Equilibrium. So there are other books, but this is the most recent book and I would highly recommend it. And I think that it would be very powerful. I was also reading from Hosea Jaffe, A History of Africa. This is a book that Chairman Amalia Shatella quotes from in many, many, many of his works, including in Vanguard. I was also talking about this book called They Were Her Property, about white women who owned Africans during the time of chattel slavery, colonial slavery inside the US. And it's very profound. So there's many other books, but these are good. And also the book written by the Solidarity Committee called Overturning the Culture of Violence, that talks about our complicity, the history of our complicity in carrying out colonial violence and genocide carried out by the white population, the colonizers.
Thank you. Our next question is we have a couple more minutes and then we'll start to close out. So our last question here is from Virginia Wilson. They say, Uhuru, this is so powerful. Chairwoman Penny, I look forward to studying the book Vanguard and also Overturning the Culture of Violence. One of my favorite articles in the Burning Spear is, we are Africans because we say we are. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, that's part of, I believe that's in this book, that's in the Question of the Nation, where the chairman talks about who is the African nation, why African people all over the world are Africans. And it's really, really powerful, very powerful. It goes into history and the future. So I recommend that. And I would like to have a political education on that very soon.
Uhuru, comment from Lisa saying, I second Vanguard and Overturning the Culture of Violence.
Uhuru.
It's still being typed. How to be an anti-colonialist. Right on. And you can get those books at burningspearmarketplace.com. Definitely get your Burning Spear subscription, get your books, study materials. So I believe that's all for our questions. I don't see any more on our feed here. And just, if you have a question later that, or, if your question didn't get addressed, we will make sure that Chairwoman Penny sees it and that someone responds to you. So you can still make a comment, and we will read that later. So, and for more information and political analysis, you can go to apscuhuru.org and also uhurusolidarity.org. And I'm not sure if we said it in the beginning, but Uhuru means freedom. It's a Swahili word that means freedom, and the party, and as well as the Solidarity Movement, we use it to keep freedom on our minds at all times. So that's what it means. And we have a couple announcements before we end. So we're almost done. Just appreciate everyone's questions, and Ali and Chairwoman Penny and the chairman and deputy chair and just everyone, behind the scenes. We have USM Chair Jesse doing the logistics for this. Really salute him in the background, and as well as Comrade Amanda keeping time. So other announcements, tune into the Omali Taught Me studies every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They are so good. It's fresh content, fresh analysis every Sunday. If you're just waking up, looking at the news, like what is going on, tune into the chairman studies every Sunday. He will answer you, and you can comment and have a direct answer from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And you can watch them on his Facebook page. Search for Chairman Omali Yeshitela. You can friend him, and as well as the YouTube channel for the Burning Spear newspaper. As well as it's an archive on the YouTube. Years of content is on there, so please engage in the studies. We have an upcoming webinar hosted by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement this Friday. It is hosted by the Southern Region, which is called How Wall Street Funds Police Terror Against the Black Community. And it's an extremely important topic for what's going on right now in the crisis of imperialism. And we have a special guest speaker is Akile Anai. She is Director of Agitation and Propaganda of the African People's Socialist Party. We'll also be hearing from Chairwoman Penny Hess, who is our keynote speaker tonight, as well as USM Chair Jesse Neville. And you can register by going to tinyurl.com/Wall Street and Police. Or you can watch on Uhuru Solidarity Movement's Facebook and YouTube page. And if you're in the Boston area, you can come to our outdoor cinema screening that I'll be hosting. So, there's lots of ways you can tune into that. Next announcement, that August 8th, Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we're having another USM webinar, and the title is called, It is Every Jew's Responsibility to Oppose the Colonial Settler State of Israel. This is a study on Zionism, colonialism, and solidarity with Palestinian and African liberation, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee. And it will be presented by APSC member Jesse Neville, chair of USM, and you can register right now at tinyurl.com/victory to Palestine. Uhuru, definitely going to be tuning into that powerful study. Again, that's Saturday, August 8th, 4 p.m. Eastern. And another announcement that this Saturday, August 1st, we are having various actions around the country hosted by different branches of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. This is for our campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations. We're having this day of action where in St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Portland, Oregon, New York City, New York, Somerville, Massachusetts, we're doing it here, as well as other cities. We are specifically targeting Bank of America with a demand that their bank and the CEO, Brian Moynihan, owes reparations to African people. They owe it to the Black Power Blueprint. And we're calling on you to come out and join us on this day. Or if you didn't hear your city listed, you can contact us we can help you start an action and set up an outreach table and help push this demand really out there in a big way. So contact us at info@uhurusolidarity.org. If you'd like to host your own action or learn more about it, you can buy the book, Overturning the Culture of Violence, as well as this written by Chairwoman Penny Hess, our guest speaker tonight, and as well as the book Vanguard and quotations. And you can subscribe to the Burning Spear newspaper, have it sent to your home every month at burningspearmarketplace.com. And that's all for our program. I want to turn it back to Chairwoman Penny Hess, see if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share. Oh, I think you're muted, Penny.
Uhuru, can you hear me? I just really appreciate this political education tonight and all of the participation of the people who have jumped into this and really salute you. This is an incredible period to be alive. This is a time to jump into action, to jump into organization, to be a cadre, to take responsibility, not just be passive, not just come out to a demonstration. We have to go way beyond that because the world has to change. And the African People's Socialist Party is leading that. So it gives us an opportunity to join the people on the planet Earth in a positive way, to turn loose our whiteness and to be, part of solving the problems under the leadership of the African working class and oppressed and colonized people on this planet. So I just want to say unity through reparations.
Reparations.
Also say the African People's Socialist Party says vanguard up, vanguard up, Uhuru.
Uhuru, vanguard up. Yes, that means just take your work to the next level, vanguard up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Please continue to share this video, and we'll see you at our next study this Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern on making Wall Street pay reparations. So see you then, Uhuru.